I'm going to tie a Muddler Minnow, and I'm starting off with a size 6 streamer hook in the vise. And the thread that I'm going to use is a 140 olive, and I'm going to get this started about the 2/3 mark here in the hook shank, and I'll wrap it down to about the point in the hook, and now I can trim the excess. The tail that I'm going to tie in is from a turkey flat, so I'm going to take 2 sections of it out, and I'm going to make sure that they match up on either side. Although, just like with my wet fly wings, I don't get too particular. So I'm going to pull one from either side of this and trim it. And then I'm going to line up the tips so that they're facing in the same direction. And I'll hold it down on either side of the hook shank here. And then I'll just take a wrap right on top and secure it down to about the barb in the hook. And now I'm just going to come through, just like with the marabou muddler, I'm going to wrap in the tip section so that it gives my body a nice uniform taper. And I've cut it at that 2/3 mark where I've started my thread. So now I'll just come back and fill in some of the gaps, and I can attach my rib. And for this I'm going to use a brassy size. I'm going to go with a copper wire, so I'll take off maybe a 4-inch section of it and tie this into the side. And all the way back to the tail, and I'll wrap it back up, and now I can tie in my body. And for this, again, you've got a lot of choices. You can use a diamond braid. I'm going to use tinsel, and this is my medium gold holographic tinsel. And so I'll tie this into the side as well. And I'll wrap this all the way down to the tail and then back up, and I'll leave my thread there, and now I can just take my wraps all the way up to where it meets my thread. So these are just nice side-by-side wraps, just covering up your threads and your wire. And when I get to the thread, then I can just tie it off, a couple of wraps and clip, and now I can bring my rib up through. So just kind of follow my lines, just nice and spaced out, until it gets to the wire again, and then I'll tie that off, or till it gets to the thread, a couple wraps on top and underneath, and then I can just helicopter this off. And now for the underwing, what I'm going to use is a squirrel tail, and I really like the fox squirrel tail. So I'm going to take off a section, a relatively modest section at that, and I'll want this, I'm just going to clean off some of the under fur, and I want this to go not quite all the way to my tail, maybe fall about halfway through. So I'll just transfer hands and take a nice even cut. I'm not going to snap this or anything. And just tie that in to the top of the pattern. Now I can add in my overwing, and for that I'm going to go back to my turkey flat. I'm just going to trim these up and then tie in the butt sections here. so it doesn't go anywhere. So I'll come back to my turkey flat and just repeat the process. So I'll take two sections that are spaced out on either end, and for this I like to get a piece that's a little bit closer to the tip of the flat. So you can see the two that I've identified here on either side, and I'll trim those. And again, repeat the process. So I'll line these up so that they have the same bend. And so that they line up tip to tip. And now I want it to fall again almost to the end of this tail. So I'm just going to take these, place them on either side of the hook shank. Make sure I have my measurement and it lined up just the way I want it. And then I can just take that wrap right on top. And if it gets a little bit wide, I'm just going to peel back this section and just remove it. And then I can also make an adjustment at this point on length if I want to shorten it up at all. You can see how it's situated on either side. When I'm happy with that, I can come back through and I'll just trim up the ends and then just make sure they're good and tied in. And now I can build out my head, and for the head I'm going to go back to my deer hair. And so what I've selected is a short fine, and this is just a natural brown. So I'll take a clump as big as my stacker can handle, and this will ensure it has a nice thick collar around it. So I'll trim it. I want to take a preliminary pass through of all the under fur, and then I'll set it in my stacker and just give it a couple of taps to get those tips good and aligned. And then I'll pull it out and take just one more pass through, and I'll also trim up the butt section. So I want it to be relatively short so that those pieces don't interfere with my tips that I stack. So I'll set this right on top, take two soft turns, pull straight down, and then let it spin, and then work my way up through the clump, and I'll just push that back, take a couple wraps in front of it, and it looks like it'll take one more batch. So I'll go back to my deer, take off another clump, and for this, since I'm not going to use the tips, I'll remove them. So I'll take a section off the hide, clean up the tips, remove any of that under fur or any short or long pieces, and I'll hold it at an angle here. Take again two soft wraps, pull straight down, let it spin, and then I can start to compress this, hold everything back, start taking some wraps that'll keep that situated there. And then finally I can whip finish this. And trim the excess. And now with my curved scissors I can start to shape the head. So I've got my curved scissors here, and I'm just going to hold it in the front of the pattern and just work my way around. And once I've made that first pass, then advance a little bit further, take my second pass, and then as I get closer to the tips, I just want to be a little bit more careful because I don't want to lose any of those here in the process. And once I get to this point, then I'll just kind of come at this angle so that I can remove all those sections that aren't tips. And if you need to thin up any as you go along, then you can. And then you can just keep building out the shape of this head. Also want to make sure I clean out the eye if you got some of those fibers that have stuck in there. And if you want to do any more precision work, as I've shown in the past, you can pick up these razor blades at a drugstore, and they help with some of the more detailed trimming. And again, I have a tendency of probably grooming too much, so know when to stop. So I'll leave it there. You get the idea. You can continue shaping this head to suit. I just want to make sure it's big enough to push water. And that is a Muddler Minnow.